Number 1. Climbing hills. One of my favorite things to do was go to my grandma's house in the fall of the year. This story takes place in the 1980s, when I was around 13 years old. I lived in Virginia Beach, but my grandma lived in rural Kentucky. So while I spent most of my time in the city, I enjoyed being out in the country whenever I could. And I always had fun climbing the hills and the trees that surrounded her house. We arrived late at night, so I couldn't go exploring the first day that I was there, but I was eager to go out and do it the next day. And the adults always wanted us to be outside and away from them, so no one cared that me and my cousin, who was visiting also, would go out and climb through the hills. I had an uncle who was only a few years older than me. He used to try and scare us when we were younger and wanted to go exploring. He would tell us that there were battles between American Indians and colonists in those hills. He made us believe that Indians were buried in really shallow graves, and that they would grab the feet of anyone who walked over the graves. That really terrified me when I was younger. The ground was covered in a huge blanket of leaves, so while we were walking, I always expected a hand to grab us as we were walking. In fact, my brother, who was playing along with my uncle, once screamed that something had grabbed his foot, and he screamed for help. Well, us younger kids had no interest in helping him. We just ran down the hill at the speed of light, screaming the entire way. Well, that was when I was a lot younger. By the time this story happened, I was mostly over that story. I had explored here and there on the hills since, and since nothing had happened to me, I figured it was just a made-up story. Anyway, my cousin Luke and I were the only ones who went hill climbing that day. We mostly had female cousins, and sometimes they would go climbing with us, but no one wanted to come along this day. This was okay with Luke and me because we didn't want to have to watch the younger kids anyway. Plus, we could go and explore deeper into the woods without them. We got to the top of the first hill, something that we had done a lot. We climbed a tree and then looked around the countryside. Most of the trees were without leaves at this time, so we could see pretty far into the hills. Luke looked in a certain direction and told me he thinks that we should see how far we could go in that direction. It would lead us further into the hills than either of us had ever gone before. I agreed. We climbed down the tree and we started down the hill. Once we got down, we immediately climbed up another hill. Once we were halfway up, we decided to just walk along on the side of this new hill and see what we would find. I'm not sure how long we were out there. The woods were really creepy in the fall. The sky was overcast, and the clouds were moving very fast in the sky. There didn't seem to be any chance of rain, though. There was definitely a chill in the air, and it was enhanced every time that the wind blew. We eventually came upon a creek. We decided to follow it, which is something we always did when we found a creek. We thought it was like a rainbow, and if we followed a creek to its end, we would find a pot of gold or something. Honestly, thinking back on that makes me feel pretty stupid, but hey, we were kids. We eventually saw a waterfall in the distance, so we decided to check that out. But as we got closer, we saw something even more curious. There was a small tent set up really close to the waterfall. Luke was very interested in it, and he wanted to go check it out. I told Luke I didn't think that was a good idea. Someone was probably out camping, and it didn't make sense to disturb them. But he couldn't be talked out of it, and he began walking in the direction of the tent. I followed him along the way, nervous about this, but not wanting to abandon my cousin. We made it pretty close to the tent, but we were still several meters away when the flap to the tent opened up. A grisly, dirty man with a matted beard and matted hair came out of the tent. In his right hand was a huge machete. He didn't look very happy that Luke and I were there. Luke stopped in his tracks, but he slipped on the leaves and landed on his butt. I was scared, thinking that this man was going to kill him. The man was yelling gibberish at the both of us. I have no idea of a single word that he said, but I really didn't care. It didn't sound nice. I meant to run for Luke, but fortunately he was able to get up on his feet before the guy got very close to him. He ran toward me and told me to run my butt off. I didn't need convincing. The man coming after us would have been terrifying even if he hadn't had the machete on him. So I turned and ran as fast as I could. The first time I looked back to Luke, the man was still chasing us, so I think I actually was able to speed up to try and get away from him. I just kept running as fast as I could, avoiding trees and bushes and hoping that I wouldn't fall. It was a very long time before either of us looked back again, but when we did, there was no sign of the old scary hermit. But that didn't make us feel any more safe. We kept running until we got back to the hill that was right by my grandma's house. We told everyone what had happened. No one was surprised. We were told that there were people who lived out in the hills like that. They told us the best thing that you could ever do was just leave those people alone. Number 2. Thunder. I was a latchkey kid growing up. Also, I was an only child. Both of my parents worked. My mom would always be home when it was time for me to go to school. My dad would have already left for work, though. By the time I got home, both of them would still be at work. I would go into the house, lock all the doors, and then do my best to pretend that I wasn't at home. I lived within town, so I didn't ride the bus. It was still a decent walk to school and back, though. My school had more children that walked than took the buses, so there was generally a big crowd of kids that gradually got sparse the further that we walked. Normally about halfway through my walk, I'd be walking home alone. On this day I was a little worried. When I walked to school it was all right. It was bright and sunny outside. However, about 2/3 into the day, it started getting really dark outside. The wind picked up and was blowing hard through the trees. The clouds were black and green and moving swiftly through the sky. It was obvious that thunderstorms were on their way. Still, it didn't start raining while I was at school. There was occasional thunder and lightning, though. I was hoping it would continue to be like this, because I hadn't brought an umbrella or a raincoat to school that day. I really hated getting rained on. After school I began walking home. The wind was fierce, but that didn't really bother me. I just wanted to keep from getting wet. I tried walking faster than I normally would, trying to get home as quickly as possible. About halfway home, this horrible siren began blaring. I had heard it before during tornado drills at school. We were taught that whenever you heard that siren, that meant a tornado was on its way. I was terrified. Getting wet was bad enough, but being caught in a tornado was even scarier. I was quite scared of tornadoes. I could only run so far before I got winded, and then I would try running again. The siren blaring through the town was good motivation to keep going. I don't know what it was that caused me to turn my head, but I did. And when I did, I saw the funnel. I had never seen a real tornado in person, before or since. If you haven't seen one, it could fill you with a mix of awe and fear. I felt both at the same time. The fear, though, was the biggest thing. I knew that I had to get home, so I tried my best to keep running. However, I kept looking to the side of me, fascinated by the tornado. And while I ran, I kept wondering if it was moving toward me or not. It was really hard to tell. I got home finally and fumbled with my key to open the door. Finally, I got the key in and opened the door. Going inside, I locked the door behind me. I knew that I was supposed to head into the basement and do the duck and cover thing. That is what they taught us in the tornado drill back then. However, I was only in the house for a few moments when I noticed something else that was scary. The backsliding glass door was shattered. Now I know that everyone told you that you should open your windows during a tornado, or the pressure will shatter them. But I didn't think that it was a tornado that did it. I mean, why would one glass door be shattered and all the others be fine? I walked into the house and over to the basement stairs. The light in the basement was on. I was sure my mom would have turned it off, but I didn't think about it too much, and I went halfway down the stairs. That is when I saw someone in our basement. Our basement was like our family room, with plenty of expensive entertainment equipment down there. This guy was obviously a burglar and stealing from us. I didn't know what to do. I was stuck between a burglar and a tornado. I mean, how could anyone have a worse day? But I decided the burglar was not nearly as bad as the finger of God, and I ran down the stairs. "Don't you hear the tornado siren?" I yelled at the guy. The burglar hadn't noticed me until then. He seemed shocked and moved toward me. "Take whatever you want," I told him. I ran over to the corner and then hid my head beneath my hands. The burglar didn't get a chance to do much of anything. The tornado was close now, sounding like a freight train running through my house. And then I heard the sound of it eating my house, and that is a sound I cannot explain. You would have to actually be in this situation to ever hear that sound, and I truly hope that never happens. Things began crumbling and falling. I felt things hit me. The tornado ripped through my house, tearing it into pieces. I half expected it to suck me up into it, but it didn't. It ripped my house apart and threw the rubble all over the neighborhood. Fortunately, I didn't get buried in rubble or anything. In fact, there didn't seem to be any major damage to the basement. Pieces of the ceiling fell in, but most of it didn't. But as I looked around, the burglar was nowhere to be seen. I had to wait in the basement for rescue workers to get me out of there. These stairs led to nowhere. Interestingly enough, the burglar ran upstairs before the tornado hit the house. He got buried in rubble and suffered some bad injuries, but didn't die. He did go to jail, though, when I explained to the firemen and the police what had happened. As for me, I had a laceration and a couple bruises on my back from things falling on me, but otherwise I was alright. Number 3. The Cousin. I had a really scary experience when I was a little girl, around the age of 8 years old. This might be a little intense, so please be warned about that ahead of time. An aunt of mine had her house burned down. Unfortunately, my aunt died in the fire. However, the firemen were able to save my 6-year-old cousin. But of course she experienced something that would likely disturb her for the rest of her life. My aunt was a single mother. She hadn't seen or heard of the father in years, so he wasn't able to take custody of his daughter. So for a while, the daughter came to live with us. My mom thought if she would be with a girl of her age, it would help her to get better. It was really hard living with her and trying to get her to do anything. I used to love tea parties and would hold them often. I couldn't get her to really take part in them at all. She would just sit there, silently, and look sad. She rarely talked, but she did once say, "The cup is empty," as if she didn't know we were just playing. The girl slept in the same room as me, as I had 2 twin beds in the room. This was fine, and for the most part, she seemed to sleep well. Occasionally she would have nightmares, and she would wake up screaming. My mom would always come to the room and grab her and hug her and try to make her feel better. I have to admit that I did not like having her around. At 8 years old, I guess I couldn't appreciate what she was going through. I feel bad about that now, especially since I have never lost my mom. But she creeped me out. She was always so quiet, only communicating with people mostly with nods and shakes of the head. She would occasionally walk into the room and look around at everyone without coming in and sitting down. Then after a while she would turn and leave without a word. It was creepy. One time my mom took us for a walk. We lived in a second-story apartment. When we left the apartment, she stopped and looked at the window to the apartment. I tried to get her to keep walking, but she didn't want to. My mom didn't notice at first, and didn't notice when I asked the girl what she was looking at. In a very rare moment of her talking, she plainly told me, "Mommy is in the window." Of course that chilled me. I didn't want much to do with her. When my mom came over and told us to keep up, she went ahead and started walking alongside my mom. I looked up at the window and I thought I saw a woman standing behind the sheer curtain. I felt my heart jump in my chest. I ran forward and I held my mother's other hand. After that, I began to get a little scared in the house. I normally didn't, but that experience was enough to be pretty terrifying. The scariest thing happened at night, and if I recall, that was about a week after we saw what was in the window. My cousin and I were sleeping. I heard some sort of creaking noise, and it brought me up and out of sleep. I looked over at my cousin's bed. I noticed that she was sitting up in the bed, and she was rocking back and forth on the bed. That was what was making the creaking sound, and she kept doing it over and over again. I called out to her, trying to get her attention. However, she didn't respond to me in any way. She just kept rocking back and forth and staring at a certain area. I turned and looked where she was looking and realized that it was my bedroom closet, and the door was open. We always kept the door closed when we were sleeping. I asked my cousin if she saw her mom in the closet, remembering what she had told me the past week. At first she didn't respond, but when I asked her again, she turned and looked at me. "That's not my mommy in your closet," she told me. I looked back to the closet and saw the shadow of a person standing in the closet. I immediately screamed for my mom at the top of my lungs. My mom rushed into the room. She immediately turned on the lights. She saw that both of us girls were terrified and asked what was going on. I told her that someone was in our bedroom closet. My mom went and searched the closet, but she didn't find anything. However, both of us assured her that we had seen it. My mom took us both into her room and let us sleep with her that night. Although we didn't sleep great, this was the only way either of us would have gotten any sleep at all. My cousin stayed with us for about another 3 months. After that, a paternal aunt asked my mom if she could take custody of the young girl. My mom was okay with that, mostly because the aunt was very wealthy and could provide a better life for her. I never saw that cousin again. After she left, I didn't see any figures in the window or in the closet ever again. I got comfortable sleeping in my room again.
Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please feel free to click the subscribe button and bell below, or click the icon of Ichigo the cat that will appear at the end of this closing. Leave me a comment, and share this video with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have an original story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please email it to the address included in the description. But most importantly, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.